there. This is Marilyn, CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs, and your host for the fourth annual edition of the Cosmic Conference. Super excited to have all of you with us today. This year, our conference is 5 weeks long and includes in-person sessions in Dubai and in Riyadh, as well as online sessions on LinkedIn Live, just like this one. This year, our focus is all on helping you lead organizations that deliver. I'm sorry, folks, I got distracted because I got some notification from my live stream. The beauties of live. But this year, our focus is all on helping you lead organizations that deliver. And we're exploring this topic through 5 sub-themes: strategy execution, scaling, transformation, capability development, which is our topic for this week, and restructuring. From October 6th till November 11th, I am joined by thought leaders and academics to share their insights, knowledge, and perspectives for a total of 12 online sessions and 5 in-person events. All of these are free to attend forever, and we're often asked why we do that. Well, actually, from the beginning of our existence, we thought that sharing our knowledge and learning in public are part of our mission. We really love our community, and we hope that this is a great way to give back to you guys. If you wanted to, give us something back in return, recently someone asked, how can I thank you for this? And so we had to think about it and come up with an answer. And there are 2 ways that you can thank us for the conference or anything that you've learned in the process of this conference. If you have some money to spare, you can donate to the Cosmic Centaurs Fund. It's dedicated to supporting women re-enter the workforce. And actually, for this month and the months to come, all of our funds are being donated to people in Gaza. If you have time but not money, you can take our 15-minute Future of Teams survey. We're running this in partnership with Dr. Connie Hadley from Boston University for the 3rd year in a row. And it's all about understanding what makes people happy and engaged at work. Both of those links will be in the comments for you. As I said, our topic for this week is capability development. We have one more event coming up, which is in-person event in Dubai this Friday, November 3rd, in partnership with Crayon. So if you happen to be available and this topic is the right one for you, it's not too late to join us. We'll give you the link to sign up. Before we begin, do show us love, give this video a like, tag someone who you think might enjoy it, ask us questions. Me and Christiane will do our absolute best to get through them before the session ends. Without further ado, today's guest is Dr. Christiane Mueck. She's an advisor at Mueck Foundation, the co-founder and advisor in Into Financial Coaching. She has 20 years experience as a strategy consultant and expert advisor in education, foundations, and startups in Europe and the Middle East. She's also a co-founder and angel investor in edtech and fintech startups. She thrives in and aims to build imaginative entrepreneurial organizations on the brink of professionalization, where she can apply her unique mix of strategy and business consulting, leadership, mentoring, and coaching skills. And she has been an absolute key member of our community and an absolute cheerleader for me personally and for our organization from the minute we met her. For that and for so much more, Christiane, I'm so grateful that you agreed to join us today.
Pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to be in the Cosmic Conference this year.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you. Today, you and I are going to be discussing the reskilling revolution. Of course, revolution is a bit of a bold word, but we really mean it. The data shows that 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2025. 87% of companies are experiencing gaps or expect to experience them within a few years. Only 13% of executives believe their companies are actually good at reskilling and upskilling their workforce. 69% of CEOs are concerned about the impact of skill shortages on their business. And the list goes on and on and on. 70% of employees believe they lack the skills needed to do their job. That is a whole bunch of terrifying statistics. And of course, it is the role of leaders to evaluate and understand and develop the capabilities of their organizations. But we're also going to talk about the fact that this doesn't just fall on the shoulders of leaders. We're going to talk about how individuals, academic institutions, and governments also play an important role in bridging this gap. And given your experience, Christiane, I can't wait to hear everything you have to tell us today. Are you ready, player?
Ready, player one.
I can tell the science fiction geeks by those who respond to me this way. I love it. Okay, so we talked about the data points around that skill revolution that's coming our way. We know that employers all around the world are facing a challenge when it comes to accessing skilled and experienced talent. What can you say to us has changed? I'm sure that upskilling and reskilling obviously has been a topic for decades. This isn't a now problem, but it feels like this one is distinct, which is why we called it a revolution. What has made it so different from the problems of the past?
So you're rightly saying this is nothing new, right? So upskilling, reskilling is something that has been around for a long time. And I actually, beyond the current challenges, I really like the fact that it's now moved much more to the forefront. On a very high level, it's a sign that lifelong employment, staying in one company, staying in one function is really no longer happening. Funny enough, because neither the employers can afford it nor the employees actually want it. As much as you want to complain about Gen Z and so on, they do want a little bit of variety in their life as well as their professional careers. So at some point they will change careers, they need new skills, and it's both their responsibility and the employers to develop those over time. Now, what has changed? The world has become a lot less predictable, right? So I would say right now, it feels like we're in the middle of a superstorm. But also, I would say 2 years ago, it felt like the middle of a superstorm when we were in the middle of COVID. So there's just a bunch of things that are happening at the same time that make it much more important that whoever is in the workforce doesn't only rely on the skills they learned 5, 10, 20 years ago, but they are constantly upskilled. So these are global events, COVID, wars, working from home, all of these skills that we had to learn in a really short time. These are new industries. Working in the Middle East, working in Saudi especially, it feels like a new sector pops up every quarter or so. I was just at a conference last week in Saudi where people were speaking about a new, hospitality play. And I was expecting them to to speak a lot about, what kind of buildings they were building and hotels and entertainment options. But basically, they spoke for half of the time about how they're upskilling young Saudis. So apparently, that was a priority. So new industries, new challenges, and then also obviously new technologies. We've been talking about AI and the likes for years and decades, and no one saw it coming that suddenly people would fully integrate this into their personal and work lives, and we have to deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember a conversation that maybe happened about 15 years ago where someone was saying, the speed at which things are changing is much faster than before. And I was very young, so I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Everything changes fast all the time. But now that I'm a bit older and I have the perspective of history on this, I definitely see how the speed of change has truly increased, and certainly in the region where we are. You mentioned it, and I did want to spend some time talking about that. As you say, the GCC region has transformed so rapidly. Dubai for sure is a great example. I always say, Dubai is younger than my mother, but has managed to build up something really incredible in that time span. But obviously Saudi is a really important topic when we're talking about skills, not least of which because of all these new industries and these new ambitions at a national level. And in fact, there's a number that could scare some of us, which is that if Saudi doesn't address its skills gap, the estimation is that it would cost the economy $200 billion. So to give you a perspective, that's 14% of the GDP by 2030. That's like a massive data point to put right there in front of us. Talk to us about what is specific in how a country like Saudi versus other places needs to address this. You were giving us that example from the conference, but how do you do it at the speed needed for the economy not to be slowed down?
So it really comes down to good decisions at the highest level. Especially when you're venturing into new sectors or you're fundamentally transforming old ones. it's interesting that you have a bit of predictability what you will need in terms of capabilities, workforce size, and so on, a few years out. Take the entertainment industry in Saudi, or take the gaming industry. Online gaming is a big market right now, but it will not develop overnight. So you can spend a few years, bringing young students into college and make sure that they get the right skills there to become successful executives, gaming programmers, game salespeople, and so on. But at the same time, you can also look into the existing workforce, the existing executives, and really find out who has the right skill sets to move to this industry, not today, not tomorrow, in a year from now, and kind of put them on the right pathway to then succeed there. And I think this is something where countries, organizations have learned over time to not neglect this, because human capital and real estate probably are the things that take the longest to develop. Everything else you can catch up pretty quickly, but these two, you need to have a really good plan, so things really come together in a meaningful way in the end.
Fair enough. And throwing money at the problem isn't the right solution. It's not enough. And so speaking of, that government piece, you spoke about the predictability. I mean, to some degree, because it's an intentionality that is driven by the government in terms of activating these sectors, there is relative predictability in their growth, or at least their aspiration. So the government can definitely put out data, directives, etc. What other role do you think the government has in supporting this upskilling revolution? We'll talk about organizations and academia later, as well as the individual level, but staying on that government piece, what other big responsibilities fall upon government that cannot be taken over by organizations?
So government, I think, has to play and has played a very important role in getting the basics right. So there's always a point when you're saying, this is something that is specific for the organization, for the specific function that this person needs to perform in. But the large scale programs for everything that I call literacies, right? And that's not just numeric and reading literacy anymore. This is not just basic internet literacy, but this is really like specific media literacy. This is how do you conduct yourself in the public space. I had a super interesting discussion recently with someone about AI literacy and AI ethics literacy. So topics like this, I think, are extremely important for governments to get involved in, to make sure that the playing field is leveled. And that also you have, let's say, safe interventions where people say, okay, this is coming from a government entity. This is a program I can trust. This will be have been vetted to be appropriate for the national and regional context, and that gives a lot of trust. A lot of content always is of course out there on all the different platforms and so on. But I think what is important is to build these foundational skills in a trusted environment.
Yeah, I really love that perspective of the government coming in to both, predict, maybe regularize, not just regulate, but regularize and create that even playing field for everybody with some of these topics that are really fundamentals. I don't see a company spending a lot of effort on AI ethics, for example, and that's definitely something that the government would take on. And now, speaking of that, staying kind of outside of the organization for just a second longer, let's talk about universities, right? It's many. When I went to study at university, none of the skills that I think I would need today were necessary. In fact, even in my first job, I started working in marketing and digital marketing around the time that Facebook's ad platform, which was really the first one to create something of value, and Google Ads, of course, emerged. So there's no way that even universities could have predicted that that was a skill that they needed to teach. But what do academic institutions need to do in the face of this change today in order not to become obsolete themselves? I mean, we're hearing more and more people talk about bypassing graduate and undergraduate education altogether, certainly driven by entrepreneurs a la Peter Thiel, who announce every other day that going to university is useless. What's your perspective on how academia needs to adapt, or not? Maybe, I don't know.
No, for sure they need to adapt, and I think they've been slow to do that. So what is fascinating to me, especially since all of these topics, like originally the internet, and then platforms, and now AI, are core research topics. And so, I mean, if any organization has seen this coming, it should be universities. However, they were really slow to adapt. And they will remain slow, right? Because it takes years to develop a completely new academic program. It for good reasons, it takes time to get the right accreditation, but also to get the right faculty to teach some of these things. I think universities really just need to find ways how to inject some of these topics without fundamentally changing the programs. And we all know how to do things like that. We're talking about electives. We're talking about guest lecturers. We're talking also about partnerships. I think that's very, very important, especially on these types of topics, that the universities are not afraid to partner with the private sector, that they really understand where the potential is there. And right now, I've been asked these questions a few times over the last few weeks, and usually universities always answer with, "Oh my God, we're going to have so much plagiarism, and we don't know who actually puts the work in anymore." But honestly, where's the courage to turn this around? Right? To say, what are the opportunities? What are the ways how we can life easier, how we can scale better, how we can, our famous lecturers more effective and more accessible. And I think those are the ways how to balance this and not only see it as a threat.
Yeah, I definitely think that treating this with fear is not the right approach. I mean, I recently heard this described, some interview somewhere, where they were saying, I mean, having AI for most of the the arts part is like having a calculator for math, whatever, 100 years ago or whenever it became accessible widely. And we never told people, no, you will not be good mathematicians if you use a calculator for some of your equations. We figured out a way to actually make things harder, to make them more interesting, more human, perhaps, also to stop, to take everything that requires more or less basic pattern recognition and things that can be easily delegated to AI, and then have humans do more interesting things. I think that's definitely the case. And maybe staying on the university piece for just a second longer, what are your perspective on, for example, I went to what you would call in French an école de métier, which is, they were teaching me a trade, right? It's like a trade school. I studied architecture, but from the French perspective, they were teaching me how to do a job, right?
Yeah.
And so that's possible for jobs like architecture, which are very stable through time, in the sense that, like, we kind of know what an architect needs to do, more or less. We might add a few skills here or there, but it's quite established. But what I really loved in, let's say, more American systems was also the fact that they didn't focus necessarily on the technical piece, but on the philosophical things, on asking the right questions, on learning other trades, and so on and so forth. And do you think there's going to be more prominence to this kind of education versus trying to figure out the technical piece, which in any case, even if I learn it today myself, no matter what the means are, I'm going to have to relearn it in 2 years in any case?
Absolutely. I mean, it's becoming an old adage, which is kind of funny because I think it feels like it's 5 minutes old, that you won't be replaced by AI, but by a smart person using AI. And that's not only applicable for AI, of course. So I guess if you're looking at some really much more basic concepts that, where the hope is that humans will still have an advantage over time. I would say really problem solving, creative problem solving for me is one of the most important ones. And
Yeah, I was sorry. I was just going to comment on that. I was just talking to one of my mentors, Prof. Jose Santos, who's actually going to be our speaker for the fourth year in a row for our closing. And he said something really beautiful about AI. He's like, AI can do a lot of things instead of us. But here's one thing that AI won't know how to do. They won't know how to manage uncertainty. And I thought that was really beautiful. And although it can be a bit exhausting for human beings to constantly manage uncertainty, I do think we're quite good at being creative and how to address it.
Exactly. Plus, we are actually this is one of our superpowers, right? So if you look at how our brain is built, whatever goes on autopilot doesn't consume much energy, and it does actually go on autopilot. Those are the things where I would say, AI is probably a very good thing to help us automate as much as possible, and then help us focus on the real problems, on the challenges. And you can translate this into a learning setting, right? Whether it's a university or practical learning on the job. All kinds of learning that are contemporary and helpful are related to challenges, to application, to kind of the top of the pyramid. When you look at like Bloom's taxonomy and so on, application to the point where you can create new things, where you can teach these things to others. Just learning by rote won't do anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go into the heart of the matter and talk about organizations here. This entire conference is about leading organizations that deliver, and particularly thinking through, that strategy implementation piece. And of course, it is the role of organizations to educate and upskill their people, but they do it theoretically for a really good reason. They do it because it's what they need in order to execute on that strategy, right? Even though oftentimes many leaders overlook that piece and they just say, "This is our new strategy, go."
Good luck.
So,
Yeah.
so how would you kind of advise leaders and organizations to think about the role of skill and capability development in strategy execution, and what are the first steps that they need to take in order to work on that?
It's difficult to give general advice, but the first couple of things I would think about is, do people understand what the strategy is? And I think that's very overlooked. I'm a management consultant by training. I know how to read slide decks and to kind of make sense of them most of the time. But not everyone is, thank God. So making the strategy understood, not only, this is your initiative, this is the cost cutting you need to do, or this is the revenue you need to bring, but really to come to the point of, why are we doing this? How do I fit in? What's our goal for the next 6 months, the next 2 years, the next 5 years? Ideally, also, how does this fit into the strategy for the industry, for the country, and so on. So I think that's very important. And it needs to be reiterated, right? If you're a large organization, you have new employees every single month. You have people who, may need to hear this a few times to be convinced. So don't assume anything in terms of, support and buy-in. Another thing for me is really, one size doesn't fit all. When it comes to strategy execution, right? So a lot of organization I see bringing in, project management training. So suddenly everyone has PMP and Prince, and I don't know how all these things are called. But the question is, this is basically filling out some forms and doing the reporting. That's the boring part of strategy execution. The really fun part of strategy execution is to say, how does this potentially make my job more interesting? How can I serve my clients better? How do I, get to have a cooler product compared to my competitors? And all of these things, I think, are often neglected because they are not things that you can report on, but they are actually things that make people super excited about implementing strategies.
Yeah, I really want to resonate with that point and maybe double click on it a little bit in terms of what we often see in organizations is that so there's a few pieces that are difficult. The first one is saying, I have this strategy. Can I map my current capabilities? So A, the assessment of your existing capabilities. B, what do I need to develop that is going to be necessary for me to execute on the strategy? And C, which is the point that you also just touched upon, who in my organization can do these things already? But also, individually, how can I develop specific people so that my capability gap from a skill set perspective is completed? And I think that individual assessment doesn't really happen. And so we tend to just like say, broadly speaking, project management, and then we'll go and pick the known things like PMP. There is nothing less relevant than PMP in most knowledge organizations. I mean, PMP comes from construction and the likes, right? And so we kind of default to, oh, here's a certifiable thing, and we're going to enroll 30 people in it. Doesn't matter whether they already know or don't know how to do this. And suddenly, you know, the audience of those trainings isn't always engaged and isn't always interested. So when it comes to
it makes you certified. It doesn't make you capable.
Yeah, not to mention what you're talking earlier in Bloom's taxonomy about the applicability of the learning and not having it be some kind of generic training. So in terms of where I stand, what I need to get to where I need to go, and how do I make sure that it's customized, you know, there's a lot of different ways to approach this. Do you have a perspective? Are there any platforms or technology tools that companies can bring in to help them with that piece? How do you see this becoming, you know, sharper and sharper in terms of that exercise in organizations?
I think there are a lot of tools out there, and I would say, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we had massive open online learning, which helped a lot of people to get up to scratch on some basic, you know, technology topics. Still very popular, still very relevant for people, especially for those who, you know, haven't been exposed to new technologies necessarily in their job. And there are still a lot of these people. Sometimes it's easy to underestimate this. I would say those are the foundational things. Then I would say there are all kinds of, as we said earlier, government programs. Big and small, specific and generic, you know, all kinds of entities supporting these kinds of developments. And I think that's something that that companies should tap into. It's available. It's for free usually, and it's something that will help, you know, the big chunk of the employees. Then definitely there's a lot of courses that are much more engaged, immersive online learning or hybrid learning. So basically, you do a bit of theory in the classroom. Maybe it's pre-recorded, but then you also get to apply this either in your job or with a work group online. So to really make sure that you know, you're really learning these skills. Most of what I've said until now, you can do in parallel to your job. So it's not a full-time learning immersion. But then, of course, there's like really deep immersions. I talked about a startup in London last week who are basically saying they're doing a 3-year degree, machine learning, and 2 years of work experience, all condensed into 3 months. Right. So they are cracking something about going up the experience curve much more quickly. And I think models like this are going to be extremely important if you're trying to get into a new industry, if you're trying to get into a new job. Or if you're just extremely geeky and you want to develop something, a new skill set for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of innovation, let's say, in the upskilling space in terms of how people acquire these skills. There's also quite a bit of innovation in terms of, I think, the being able to map your existing capabilities at almost an individual level. We've seen a lot of these platforms emerge, whether they're focused on specific industries, like we've seen a lot in tech and coding, because those are easy to assess, but also in less codified, let's say, skill sets around leadership or anything else, or management, where you're able, through good technology, to understand the capabilities of the organization at scale, and at least start with a map. While it does not give you the
Exactly.
solution of how you go from here to there, it can at least tell you where you are and how many points differences you have versus where you want to be. And actually, on Friday in our in-person event, we'll be helping leaders to think about, how do I go from this is my strategy to what is the business capability that I need to have, and then what are the supporting organizational capabilities that can ladder up to that, knowing that, broadly speaking, capabilities obviously go beyond skills, but today we're focused on skills, and on Friday we'll kind of generalize this a little bit. I have a great question from the audience around how to create something that's not a one size fits all. Considering the multi generational workforce, how can organizations tailor their reskilling programs to meet the unique learning preferences of different groups, be they age groups, be they cultural, be they, whatever aspect creates that diversity? How do you make sure that you're offering upskilling opportunities that match to these various learning preferences?
That's if you can answer this really well, that's probably $100 million opportunity. There are, I would say that the techniques and principles, the foundations that we just talked about, are probably the same. It's just a question of, how do you ensure accessibility? How do you make the initial hurdle for adaptation relatively low? And by the way, you have similar challenges that need to be addressed for people of determination, for people that have some kind of learning difficulty, and so on. So I think this is a big task for anyone who is in L&D and in upskilling, to really make sure that all of the target groups are being serviced. Also keep in mind, if we were talking about upskilling and reskilling in the past, very often we said, like, it's enough if we upskill 10%, 20% of our workforce. But now we're looking, in most regions globally, we're looking at decreasing birth rates. The biggest generations have already entered the labor market, for example, in the Middle East, or are just leaving the labor market in Europe. And so you really need to design all kinds of reskilling interventions around being accessible by everyone, not just the few that are already tech savvy, that know how to navigate a Zoom call. And so to really make this very, very easy from the beginning.
Yeah, and I really think that actually also, to answer that question from the audience, to add to what you're saying as well, is a partnership between leaders or managers and L&D is so important. Sometimes we'll find, so whenever they don't work well together or don't work together at all, or let's say the budget is with one but not the other, unless that leader is very, very intentional about upskilling, they know what their team needs, but they don't know how to choose the solution that is the best fitting, because their expertise is, we need these skills. Their expertise is not, here's how we can deliver them. And then you have
Yes.
the opposite problem when it's just L&D, which is, yeah, they'll like find great training providers, they'll try to do something, really meaningful, but they don't understand the business as well. And so they haven't really nailed it on the head in terms of what is the actual thing that is going to move the needle for the business. I think that partnership is really important. And that takes me to another question that I had for you, which is, Obviously L&D, even as a title, only begins to exist in very large organizations, right? Like most companies these days, they probably won't even hire an HR person, let alone an L&D person, until they're, beyond 80, 100 individuals. So what's the approach that you think small business leaders, SME leaders, who do think that L&D is really, really important, who understand that upskilling is a key part of developing competitive advantage, but they think that initiatives such as the ones that big companies can afford to have are out of reach for their size and scale? What should their approach to upskilling sound like?
So you're getting to a situation where you don't have the choice anymore. So if you don't upskill, you will eventually lose your best employees. And this is something I hear a lot of people complaining about, that, especially for SMEs or in entry-level jobs, people jump around a lot, and people, will leave you for an extra, not even $1,000, but 1,000 SAR. So you have a problem there that L&D is partly a solution for. So learning and development is not, upskilling, is not only upskilling and makes you better and more efficient at your job, but it also does show that you as the employer care about your employees. It's especially when you're a young early stage, early in your career, you will not know what are the things that you need to learn, what are the things that you that will get you to the next level. And having an organization invest ever so slightly even in L&D, in doing even the most basic things around individual development plans, goal setting, regular feedback sessions. It sounds so easy, it sounds so obvious, but you don't need to send people to a program that costs tens of thousands of dollars in Switzerland. There are some very easy ways about practice apprenticeship, practice mentorship, and I think those are very good starting points. The other point I would like to make on this is really sourcing ideas and needs from your employees. Again, you don't need a consultant to do a training needs analysis. You sit with the people in your organization. If you're 80 people, you can do that in an afternoon, and you find out what would be the most meaningful upskilling interventions for them. And you'll discover that, and then you'll find a way to make it happen. So it's very basic topics, but I think those are still the ones that will set you apart as an organization.
I couldn't agree more. I really love what you're saying. As a small business owner, I echo that so much. I think it's in the discipline of actually what every organization should do, but when you're small, you can do it so much better, of merging the performance review, the ongoing discussions. Yes, surely, I mean, Cosmic Centers can't afford to send anybody to a $10,000 training program, so that's out of the way, which forces us to get crafty and creative about how we help our people learn their skills. We have a very simple questionnaire, and actually we just had 3 new joiners on our team, and it's one of my tasks to actually send them this questionnaire, to help them go from the goals of the company that they're kind of connected to the goals that they have for their own career, for their own job at Cosmic, but also beyond. What would they like to learn? And then you can choose like a simple mapping from there. We, for example, are going to embark as of the end of November in what we call the Cosmic Boot Camp, which is that,
Fascinating.
yeah, which is that every week or other week, out of all of these skills that everybody has identified, we take the ones that are shared, and we just do a 1 hour training session. And sometimes it's an a cappella training session, meaning, oh, we just arrive and we're like, oh, you guys wanted to learn about project management? All right, well, I've been project managing my whole life. Here are the 5 things you need to know. And it doesn't have to be a full training, super structured. Sometimes even just showing up and talking over a few slides for an hour is good enough. We do something called Grow Day, which is that once every, I'm going to say maybe 3 times a year we do this. where we don't do client meetings, we don't answer emails, we don't exist, and we pick a topic that we want to learn about, and we just go and do that for a whole day. So I think I love your answer, because it's just about bridging the performance of the company, the individual, and the skills in very simple terms, providing those opportunities for learning. They don't have to be expensive, they don't have to be lengthy, but anything that adds intentionality. And I really love what you said about this becoming a competitive advantage in terms of attracting and retaining talent. That's what talent wants. They want to learn. And I think the number is something like 63% of people will change their jobs because they got a upskilling opportunity in the next one, not just because of a
Wow.
salary upgrade, right? And so you got this straight on the head. I think it's so essential to think about it this way, and to dedicate more time to helping people learn on the job as well. That can be a great form of learning. So I got really passionate here, but I really loved your answer.
So to build on this, there's also one other thing that I would be very careful about, which is credentialing. So a lot of people, I live on LinkedIn. I really like the format. I like looking up people's CVs, what they reveal about themselves, and I do understand that especially if you're early career, there are a lot of things that you want to learn for the first time, and then there's a credential, and you post this online. But I would always encourage the employees, but also the employers, to really consciously create opportunities for adopting all of the learning content into real life projects. Yeah, this is so important. This will make it so much more important. And that's, for me, it's the much more interesting credential, right? So if someone has put, I did a sales excellence course on some platform, versus I have this favorite charity and I raised $5,000 for them by talking to hundreds of people. I mean, guess who I would like to hire, right? The person who has demonstrated that they have mastered the skill by actually doing it.
I love that. Actually, not to toot our own horn, but I will. As a training partner, we actually require, first of all, we never do one-off sessions because we don't believe in them. But second of all, we require that there is an assignment that we support our trainees with that is a direct business deliverable in
Yeah.
our trainings, precisely for that. Because credentialing, we had a question actually from the audience, from Mubashira, about that, about the credentialing piece, and I think you answered it without me asking it to you. Is really secondary. Like, who cares about that stuff? We care that you know how to do your job better, that you're happier in your job because of that, and it's definitely through applicability. I think there's another question here that I'd love for us to answer as well, is how do you measure the effectiveness of reskilling and upskilling initiatives? So one is that you're able to apply it to your job. That we got really quickly. Are there any other, either leading or lagging KPIs that you think are great way, especially, like L&D people or even managers, they're always scraping for budget. They have to go and prove that this training is going to do something good for the company. What are some of the ways that you think that they can demonstrate that something has been effective?
Really important point. Incredibly difficult to answer. Again, I think the proof comes from people using the newly developed knowledge and skills, really applying them, and applying them within a certain period. So maybe within 3 months, so you don't forget. And in an ideal world, they would become part of your permanent toolbox, right? So
They're now fully acquired skills.
exactly. And
Yeah, and I
you can measure this. You can do self measurement and or a 360
yeah,
or whatever. But and at the end of the day, it's really a question of was this interesting enough and useful enough for me to actually now use it on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you made a great point about that earlier as well, tying it back to performance. You're talking about whether it's self-assessment or 360 assessment. And I think what we also can say about learning and development is, you require something like a theory of change model here, right? Because as you say, the reason why it's difficult is it's not immediate. It's not like I learned this skill and I increased revenues by 1,000, whatever. It takes a minute. But I think if you kind of think of, okay, what is the direct output? Yeah, the output is people came, they attended, they completed. Great, great. What happens just after that? And it's what you're saying. It's like, well, now people have taken the skill and applied it to a deliverable within 3 months, and I can show you that. Now, what happens within the year? Well, their manager or their peers or their clients or whatever evaluation, or if it's a technical skill, the assessment says that they now score higher on this. Okay, now what happens within 2 years? Well, actually, their impact on the P&L is this much, right? And so if you're able to explain that to your leadership, to your finance team, to whoever is controlling the access to resource, then I think you can show that there is effectiveness. It just takes a bit of patience, but hopefully companies aren't so short-minded these days that they can't have that kind of patience. Um,
And
maybe
there's no
one
direct
last.
correlation, right? There's no direct correlation. It's not like because I did the sales course 2 years ago, now I'm hitting my targets and before not. But it's about how this becomes embedded, how there's a follow-up, how also, the respective leader can, as you said earlier, use this in their leadership and the coaching of the employees. As a reference point to say, you know what, there's something that you had learned, maybe you had forgotten, but now you can come back to this and use this to your advantage. So for me, all of these journeys are usually quite personal. And I think it's that's much more important, especially for small and medium-sized companies, than to say, we have 80% of our employees did this in this training. I mean, what does that even mean if you have 50 people, right? This is
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Beautiful. One last question before I take us to our rapid fire. And this is really, we had not prepared this question, but it's also not coming from the audience. It's coming from me, which is, what kind of culture do you think we need to develop in organizations so that learning becomes intrinsic to doing business?
For me, it's a question of values, and especially of demonstrated values. And it starts with the top. So if I'm looking at senior leaders around me and they constantly tell me about how much they like working with their coach and how much they like making connections with people in other industries, and how they're looking for a new challenge and a new development program because their MBA has been so many years ago now. That sets the standard for me as an employee to say, oh, this is something that is very normal, that successful people do. So this is something I should look out for and make sure I integrate into my portfolio. Now, what then the specific intervention is that makes sense for you at the specific stage in your career. Sometimes you might want to do something that's more personal development, something general leadership development, something more technical skills development. That really depends on the stage of your career. I think a lot of people right now, even senior leaders, are looking to develop technical skills, which 10 years ago you would have said, well, these people are so high up, they're flying so high, they don't need to learn about AI. Guess what? They want to, and also they have to. So for me, it's a question of values, demonstrated values, lived values, and that then shapes the culture. And basically, if a new person joins this tribe, this should be one of the first things that they recognize, that people invest in themselves, invest in each other, and also talk about it. I think that's one of the things that is done way too little. People do all kinds of these things on the weekends in their personal time. They should talk about it, and they should bring it back into their professional life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of our values is curiosity, and so we never stop learning. I totally understand that. And a great example here from May in the audience, also one practice is teach back, which is if someone goes out and learns something, then they can come back and teach it to the team within their return. Another great, small thing, no budget requires. It's just about the discipline of setting the time and making it work and not letting, client meetings or whatever urgency override it. And that's the demonstrated role modeling, which is to say this is important. We're not going to cancel it the second something comes up.
Love it.
And with that, Christiane, that comes to the end of our session today. I have to apologize from the audience. Also, I've been muting myself quite a bit because I have a terrible cough. So I might cough in the middle of this. But I have 3 quick questions that we're asking everybody who attends our sessions to answer by either completing them or giving me a really short answer. And the first one is, great strategy is ...
Done. Implemented. Sorry, did
that.
you need longer?
Yes, I needed a longer cough break, but it's all good. What is the one leadership quality that is most needed to improve an organization's ability to deliver on its strategy?
I think as an organization, agility. As a leadership quality, authenticity.
I love that. That's a great one. No one said that to us before. I think that's a really nice one. All right. And what is the one book about strategy or strategy execution that you think every leader should read today?
I don't know. Don't read general books about strategy. Read stuff that is super relevant for your sector, because those are the much more relevant stories.
I like that.
And as a leader, I think everyone should read Give and Take by Adam Grant and The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek.
Oh my God, both of them incredible recommendations. I recommend them all the time. I think they're beautiful books. And I think they do tell us a lot about also thinking long term and understanding that things aren't linear. And I think that's the ability to understand that things aren't linear is essential to delivering on your strategy, because otherwise you might think you're not making progress when in fact you are. And so thank you for sharing those. They're really beautiful. All right. Christiane, thanks for joining us. A great big thank you as well to all of our attendees for joining us today and being part of our discussion. Quite a few questions there in the audience. I think we got through most of them, but I might have missed one. So I'll tag you in it in case you want to go back and answer in writing. As always, all of our sessions are free to attend, but if you found this session valuable, you can give back to us by donating to the Cosmic Centers Fund or by taking our Future of Teams survey. You can also go on our website, subscribe to our newsletter, make sure you don't miss out. And if you happen to be in Dubai and happen to be free on Friday morning, we'll drop the link for you to sign up to our event all about capability development. If not, we'll see you for our next session next week here on LinkedIn Live, where I'll be speaking to Rabia Breir and Alex Damouni from Tandem. We're going to be talking about a difficult topic, but leading organizations through restructuring or right sizing, no matter what you prefer to call it. You'll find us here next Wednesday, November 8th at 5 p.m. UAE time on LinkedIn Live. Thank you again, everybody, for being with us, and see you next week.